So let's keep our eye on the global economy now as we speak to Schroders chief economist Keith Wade. Keith, thank you so much for joining us. Now, there's so much attention on the U.S. jobs report. We spoke to Nouriel Roubini and also to Neil Ferguson, who told me, yes, it's important, but it's not going to, be a give and take. Are we going to go into a recession or a recovery phase?
No, that's probably right, but of course this is the critical release that we get this month. The labour market has been one of the weakest parts of the US economy. But having said that, I think that is still a surprise in many ways, because although the labour market's been weak, productivity growth in the economy has been very strong, and of course profits have been strong too. So we're actually in the more optimistic camp. We think that we could well see employment beginning to improve, perhaps not this month, but certainly later on in the year as companies begin to start to recruit again.
Keith, optimistic enough to actually rule out a double-dip recession in the United States?
Well, we're not looking for a double dip. We feel that double dips generally are quite unusual. You need to have some kind of policy tightening to deliver that. And I believe that with the corporate sector in the state it is at the moment, and the household sector also having made a lot of adjustment in terms of its balance sheet and savings ratio, I don't think we're going to get the retrenchment on the private sector side that you would normally need to see in order to get a double dip.
Now, you're also expecting actually a slow growth and a slow recovery, or a weak growth and a slow recovery. What does it actually mean? That this, economy, like the rest of the world, is just going to continue bumbling along for the next couple of years? And is quantitative easing going to be enough to actually lift us out of this crisis?
Well, in terms of the bumbling along, that is the typical pattern that you see when an economy emerges from a financial crisis. There have been many studies of economies that have been hit by the same kind of forces that are affecting the US and, of course, the UK and the European economies at the moment. And growth coming out of those downturns is always very weak, because the balance sheets of the private sector need to be restructured. What we're seeing now is a gradual upturn, but it's very slow. The banks are still quite cautious. People are still quite cautious about borrowing. So that rather weak recovery is going to be a pattern that we have to get used to. Can the Fed do much about it? Well, not a great deal, but I do think that we could well see some more quantitative easing. I think that would generally help to free up markets a little bit more and provide a little bit more liquidity, but I don't think it will make a huge amount of difference. We really have to see this private sector adjustment take place. I think we've seen a lot of it already, which is why I don't think there'll be a double dip, but we're not in the kind of environment where we could see, say, a strong housing market or a strong boost in auto sales, which would really drive a strong recovery from here.
Keith, what does actually sluggish growth in the U.S. mean for Europe? I mean, we have these austerity measures. We're still very reliant on selling our goods to the U.S. What happens if they do bumble along for a couple of years?
Well, obviously it means that European growth is not going to be as strong as it would be. And the real prospect there is to try and tap into global growth, because we are still in a world where the growth in Asia and the emerging markets is still very robust, and demand from those areas is still strong. So although the US is important, at the margin, the growth for Europe is probably going to have to come more from the emerging world, where there is the demand for European exports.
Keith, thank you so much. Keith Wade there.